Broadcasting from Boston, Massachusetts, the Smart Cities podcast is the only podcast dedicated to all things smart cities. The podcast is the creation of ARC Advisory Group's Smart City practice. ARC advises leading companies, municipalities, and governments on technology trends and market dynamics that affect their business and quality of life in their cities. To engage further, please like and share our podcast or reach out directly on Twitter at Smart City Viewpoints or on our website at www.arcweb.com/industries/smart-cities.
Good morning, everyone. This is Larry O'Brien of ARC Advisory Group, and welcome to another edition of the ARC Smart Cities podcast. I have with me here today Jim Frazer of ARC. Morning, Jim.
Hello there, Larry.
And also Mr. Joel Rakow of Fortium Partners, I should say. So good morning, Joel.
Good morning. Nice to talk to you both.
Yeah, thanks for joining us this morning. So just by way of introduction, Jim Frazer and myself are part of the Smart Cities team at ARC. We host a lot of these regular Smart Cities podcasts. I am also on the Cybersecurity team at ARC. Jim, you want to say a couple of words about yourself, and then we can introduce Joel?
Sure. I'm the Vice President of Smart Cities here at ARC. Our team covers the 9 verticals of Smart Cities, as well as all the underlying technologies. And just happy to be here, Larry. Thanks for inviting me.
Thanks. And Joel?
So I'm with Fortium Partners. We have 100 CIOs and CISOs around the country. Everyone has held the position in a nationally prominent company, from Google and Apple and Salesforce to Dun & Bradstreet, Allstate, Jacobs Engineering. Almost all the companies are recognizable. We're around it's a national firm. I focus on building IoT, and which is a subset of building systems, which includes building automation and industrial control systems. And the reason I call what I focus on as the junior varsity of building systems, and it's things like voice over IP phone, video surveillance, access control, office, building office machines, elevators, everything left of engineered HVAC. And
right.
The position is that it's a kind of not very well covered area. There's no technical organization that really has oversight over it at a very close level. And there's a lot to be learned, I think, from other areas, from IT can learn, and industrial control systems and building automation by what happens in this open, kind of unprotected space.
Yeah, I think that's an interesting topic, and it's one that we cover at ARC pretty extensively too. I don't know if I would call it junior varsity, because to us anyway, all those systems that you mentioned, like video surveillance systems and access control, and those are all part of the OT world of building automation systems, right? I mean, these are systems that have a direct impact on the people that live and work in these buildings, on human safety, and many other factors. So these are essential systems to me at the operating technology level that are being affected by this sort of influx of IoT into this world of what was formerly dominated by a lot of these sort of proprietary, very isolated kind of systems, right?
Yeah. Well, okay. I mean, I just use the junior varsity just kind of as a metaphor to that, the best coaches are not always overlooking this technology.
Yeah.
That's one way to think about it.
Right.
And it really seems like, in looking at the research of cyber attacks, that this is the entry point. This is where certainly nation states gain their foothold inside the perimeter of a company, and then they'll move either to the right to IT, or to the left to SCADA and building automation systems. But more than half, according to the Harvard Business Review, more than half of all cyber attacks on American companies in the year 2017, they got their initial point of entry through building systems. Then Microsoft came out only a couple of months later. The research appeared last year in 2019. Microsoft came out with an IoT signals and said the three most common systems that successful attacks for American public corporations, attacks perpetrated by nation states, and they identified 1,400 of them. The top three building systems that they gained entry through were in order: voice over IP telephone, video surveillance, the recording component, and office machines.
Mm. Yeah, that's obviously a big problem. We see the same problem too at ARC, that the whole topic of cybersecurity is really not really much discussed or addressed within the building automation segment. I think it's just starting to now. We see some momentum coming along as far as more stringent controls and developing worker knowledge in that area and so forth. But you had a pretty interesting article that I came across on LinkedIn, which is how we originally met, that are these sort of 5 game changers for 2020 that are going to sort of, provide more of an impetus towards implementing stricter cybersecurity controls within building automation. Can you talk a little bit about what you think those 5 game changers are going to be this year that are going to change the whole picture for us?
Sure. Well, the first one is exactly what you said. We have a clearer understanding of how building systems and building IoT, which again, the junior varsity type systems, how they function in this. So we've got the research from Harvard Business Review, and we have the research from Microsoft. Then on closer inspection on these 3 systems, there's one thing that they all have in common. They're all basically driving an analog reality to a digital signal, which then becomes packetized for Ethernet transmission. So if you think about this from a strategic point of view as a hacker, this is a place that the systems are largely unprotected. It's a place where there's 2 or 3 points of vulnerability, the translation from analog to digital, and then from digital to packets, and then actually the point where they enter the infrastructure of IT. So think about this. We're getting to the signal before it becomes part of IT infrastructure, where all of these vendors who say that they're monitoring for intrusion and for cyber breaches using the IT technology and IT method. But the hackers are successfully getting their traffic into there before it enters the IT infrastructure. And so their traffic looks just like all the other traffic, and they can perpetrate whatever the exploit is undetected. And that's how Stuxnet worked, Aurora worked, all the major sophisticated cyber attacks, plus, probably dozens of others that we're not aware of that are under the radar. That makes sense?
It makes sense to me. And yeah, it's really coming in at that sort of deep OT level, right? If you're familiar with the Purdue reference model for manufacturing, that's level 0, level 1, right?
That's right.
Which I think is a little bit different maybe from what we've seen in some of the attacks in the world of manufacturing, where they tend to come in, through upper level networks and sort of drill their way down into, the OT layer. So it's a little bit of a different approach.
Okay, so the problem is this number 1 situation that got all clarified. You would say, well, okay, so let's just pay a little more attention to securing these building IoT. So it's not so easy to get into the voice over IP system and the video surveillance and the building machines. But then NIST comes out in 2019 and says, we can't give you a standard for IoT. there are at least 50 considerations that have to be applied in order to figure out how to secure these devices. And of those 50, the configurations are almost all of them have to be done manually because these devices never went through that interoperation period where all the IT devices, remember interoperability?
Mm-hmm.
Well, those conferences used to happen. Well, the folks who developed these IoT devices, now I'm saying the building IoT, because these folks have been around long before the internet, and they had their practices and their policies and their manufacturing systems and design people. They existed before the internet, and they didn't change quickly enough. And so a lot of the modern and sort of the more contemporary IoT devices are a little more security aware. But these are other companies, these building IoT, these are pretty big companies, and it takes them a while to turn their ship around. And even today, they're marketing things with default passwords, the only one user account in those passwords. So if anybody gets that password, they can get in, and you can't tell because it doesn't log. And even if it did log, you wouldn't know which of the users was using the same password.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, dozens of issues like that. Firmware can't be monitored. You don't know what version of the firmware. So NIST just struck out. They said, we can't give you a standard, but we can tell you what the considerations are and the types of configurations you have to make. Big revolution, because everyone in this industry, not this industry, but all end user organizations were thinking they could just rely on having a NIST standard apply. And you'd hear the question, does this comply with NIST? Or what NIST framework does this comply with? Well, NIST said it isn't going to happen.
Yeah, the world of buildings is a little bit different. We do have some standards activities in the industry that I think apply to buildings, but I've said a lot of times the industry itself hasn't rallied around a standard for cybersecurity yet. We kind of believe in the IEC 62443 standard, and there's some efforts going on there, but the industry has not, like you said, they have not officially adopted a standard.
Right.
So that's still a problem.
And when they do, remember a lot of these systems are pretty expensive, and they sort of have a life cycle of 10, 15, 20 years.
Yeah, 20 years or more. It always surprises me how old some of the systems are that are installed out there, and that's one of the unique things I think in this segment is you have this mixture of extremely old systems and this brand new IoT stuff that's coming down, and it makes it difficult to manage if you're at the operational level.
Yep. So those are two really big game changers, I think, that happened last year. So now the third one is NIST, by identifying their considerations and the configurations, is basically saying, and we think that this is really important, and at Fortium, we've made a pretty big response to this particular change. They said, it's up to you guys to secure these devices at the device layer, at the device itself, because the IT's tools don't work for your systems, because your systems are designed without security and centralized management as a primary design consideration. So we took the response, and I won't go into this very long because this is kind of proprietary, and that we developed what we call the Never Cry Cyber Defense for Building IoT. And it's a method of helping the suppliers of building IoT develop security practices that are commercially viable and being transparent about it. And it's a way to kind of raise the level of security among these building IoT devices. But the third thing really is that we need to start focusing on the devices themselves, and somebody needs to get out there and climb those ladders and do that work to secure the devices, or do it when it's installed. And the controls are not heavy. They're not expensive. They don't take a long time. If you know you're going to do, if you know your system and you know the controls, when you're doing the actual installation and the setup, it might add less than 1% of the time for the project deployment, but it will secure the devices. And so that's the third one. The fourth change is that a lot of technology has come to market in 2019 in a critical mass to secure these devices at a network layer. So the beauty is that you have a device layer security, and there is the capability now of a network layer security. And having two layers of security is, it's probably a commercially viable way to exist in the market and feel like you've done a reasonable job of protecting your systems. Although we still have to get to the people one, but we'll get to that in a minute.
Mm-hmm.
So
yeah, that's consistent with like a defense in depth approach.
Yes. Oh yeah. It's the only way that you don't think like that in security. You're not going to be securing your devices. So some of the cool technology that came out to secure these devices at a network level is the software-defined network. So you can now gather them all into a virtual network and then apply a kind of a firewall, treat it like a firewall, and have a managed port to get into them. Mm-hmm. So that's pretty good. We like that as a solution. The downside of that is every time you replace a device, you change a device, you move it off, you have to kind of update the network-defined security portal. So the alternative to that, which we think is really beautiful, but probably more expensive, is the software-defined perimeter, which is kind of the HIP protocol, where it cloaks the identity portion of the IP address, but leaves the location of the IP address open. So by cloaking the identity, it basically makes that device invisible to anyone who does not have the encryption key to uncloak it. Two really, really great things, but now neither of those will solve the problem of the voice over IP phone system or the video surveillance or the building machines, because none of those really handle the sensors, because sensors really can't be included in a software-defined network, because generally they don't even have an IP address. And what we like for that is the signal, either the signal isolation, where you capture the signal before it goes in to the sensor, and then when it comes out, and you make sure that hasn't been you check it for integrity, given that the protocol, whatever protocols are in there, that there's no additional thing going on than the protocols that are recognized by that sensor monitoring tool. And we also like the approach of doing a fingerprint of the sensors, so that you know what it looks like when it's operating normally, and you can check for anomalies. We think those two things are really, really cool and really will solve the problem, and we like it a lot.
Yeah, there's a lot of new technologies, I think, coming that can address all these different layers of security, but actually putting them into place and getting people to use them correctly, like you said, that we were talking about this earlier, goes back to our view anyway, and I know that's your view too, of people, processes, and technology, and they're all, all three are interrelated, and you can have a lot of good technologies, but if you don't have the right work processes in place or the trained people to implement those processes, that can be a problem, which is what I think about. What's interesting about what you're doing at Fortium is trying to develop that sort of that people role and the process role a little bit more, as far as how do these people deal with these technologies out there in operating environments.
Right. That's right. And we hope, through conversations like this, that we take advantage of the opportunities that we actually do have. So, for example, with the suppliers of building systems, it's been our experience that they don't readily, there's a reticence for them to step up and say, okay, we need to, take care of our cybersecurity practices, and we need to improve them. They'd like to, but they don't really know what they're doing. They don't know how to make a good choice. So we think that for ARC, a really good ARC advisory is a good role would be to advise that your end user organizations that they should sort of use their market power to notify their suppliers that they need to improve their practices and give them this is the 3 or 4 or 5 things that we need, and we need it to be done in, say, 6 months, and let us know what you're going to do, and if you need some help, here's some people who can help you. And I think in that way we find about 70% of the building suppliers will raise their practices because they don't want to lose the client as a customer. And then the customer gets to decide whether they keep the other ones or they find replacements who have done it. That's one way to get the people who are deploying the building systems and servicing them. That's one way to get them to work as a catalyst and get them to take initiative. The other thing is the junior varsity, the building IoT ones are typically managed by the facilities management group, and they rarely have technical sophistication inside their organization. And so what we like to do is offer them a facilities management CIO to work with them on a part-time basis and provide that technology leadership. And we think of it in the same way as a CEO has a CFO that really understands, finance and accounting and that. The facilities manager would have a comparable, instead of a CFO, would be a facilities management CIO who would take care of the security side of the devices they're pulling in, maintain diplomatic relations with the IT organization and the engineering organization, so that there's some collaboration and coordination. And we think that those two things, and we've got a solution for building IoT and cybersecurity.
Yeah, you really need that collaboration between the IT side and the OT side, and we talk a lot about this whole issue of convergence at ARC, which is really just another term for talking about this sort of merging or clashing, or however you want to put it, between the worlds of IT and OT. I know that's a big problem in building automation too, because the skill sets are real different when you look at buildings. And I think it's a great idea to sort of raise the role, of cybersecurity, specifically at the OT level. And I think what Fortium is doing is pretty interesting in that regard. So you just have a pool of CISOs and CIOs that you can draw from to use as trusted advisors for cybersecurity at the OT level. Is that how that works?
Yeah, I can't say that all of them are interested. Yeah. I can't say, and all of them are never available. But these are pretty small projects, mm-hmm. There are a number of partners that I have that have had experience in this area. So, for example, we have the CIO of LA Department of Water and Power. He's been dealing with SCADA systems and controls and operational technology his whole career. He's like one of us, and he's totally in on this. I've got 3 or 4 that have been with energy companies and refineries, water treatment facilities. So there are ones that have that experience and are and understand it. And so as we get projects, we bring them in and kind of get them so that they understand it. and they understand what a lot of them never really thought about the differences in the cultures that are kind of disparate. But it takes a little bit of orientation and a couple of projects, and we bring them in as we're expanding our services.
Culture change is tough.
Yeah, right.
Especially in a well-entrenched industry, it's not an easy thing to do. But to me, it's the only way you can adapt to new technologies and new threats as they come along. It does require a culture change. I think a lot of the maintenance practices we have, I know it's true for the industrial sector as well. I mean, these are practices that date back 50 years, right?
That's right.
Not an easy thing to change. But back to the people side, I mean, do you think that people are aware of the impact of cybersecurity? Do you see issues as far as, cost justification or why should I care about cybersecurity? What's the risk to me? Because from what we've seen, obviously the financial impact it can be huge in the wake of a cyber attack. But, being in the world of OT, I mean, we also, think that health and safety and so forth are paramount. How do you think the rest of the industry sees that? Do they really see what's going on here as far as the risk and the potential benefits of investing in better cybersecurity?
Well, I think that in October of 2017, the WannaCry attack hit, and then there was a second attack, and one appeared above the fold of the Washington Post, and another appeared, and this is both in the same month, above the fold on the New York Times. And I believe at that point, cybersecurity awareness became it sort of really was given birth to everybody, to people outside of security. And over the period of time, and we've done nothing but see cybersecurity attacks increase. Right. Mm-hmm. So it's really I believe that it's no longer, well, should we spend money on it? It's should we spend more money on it? I believe that it's pretty well there. I don't run into people very often that are saying we're still waiting and seeing if it's for real.
Yeah, that's good to hear. And this isn't something that requires a huge investment up front, like you said. I mean, a lot of these are kind of changes to processes that are already in place where it's not a big financial investment, but it's an investment as far as time and, trying to get people to do things a little bit differently than they've done them before. So this isn't you don't necessarily have to start with a huge capital outlay, right?
Well, that's an excellent point. And I tend to avoid talking about money because then it starts to sound like a sales thing.
Yeah.
Never cry. Cybersecurity defense, we don't even think the end user should pay for it. We think that they can readily have the supplier of the building IoT take care of it themselves, and we contract directly with those suppliers, and we have a fixed scope and a fixed price, and we do it over 4 or 5 months with them. So it's only maybe $1,600 a month for them to get through it. And it should be their responsibility. And like I said, it's only going to increase the cost of the delivery by less than 1%. Because if you've got these on your agenda, these 30 or 40 controls that you're going to implement, it doesn't take long to click the box that says disable anonymous access.
Right. Yeah. Pretty simple stuff. Yeah.
It is simple stuff. It's just a hygiene. It's not like a big addition to the scope of work. So that has no financial impact on the end user organization. And if it's a medical center, I mean, they might have 50 of these. Some of the big medical centers, they'll have 50 of these building system, building IoT suppliers. The cost is negligible to the medical center.
Yeah,
it's just a coordination thing, and we take on all of that effort. Oh. And on the cost of the FM, facilities management, CIO or CISO, that can be 10 hours a month. It's not a big role, and It's, it can be virtual and it can be part-time. So in either case, this does not require a lot of money.
Well, Joel, thanks. This is Jim. I think you answered my upcoming question quite a bit, but there are three pillars of digital transformation, and when we think about cybersecurity, it's mostly about the software and the technology. But those other pillars of digital transformation are, well, altering your business processes to reflect that new reality, and then also training your people. So I do appreciate the fact that if you can offload those last two off on the vendor or the supplier, that makes the FM's job that much easier.
Yes, I agree, and I think I don't know if it's a mistake, but the tendency is to look at the people and just try and do it with the same team that's been doing the same thing for a while. But we find that if we come in for a few hours a month and we bring a fresh look, it takes just a couple of weeks and people start seeing things differently. And they know that, like, we're not going to, there's nobody at Fortium that wants to stay. We pretty much like what we're doing. And so we're not a threat to anybody. And so they get to take in the ideas and not feel like they either get on board and then they do good things and it becomes a career enhancer for them. And we communicate. The more you understand cybersecurity in your role, you become more valuable to other companies. So it's just a great career development opportunity for people if when it's done in a way that's not threatening.
Yeah, very true. Did you have another question, Jim?
No. Well,
okay.
Well, we can go further down that road. Then, as far as a cybersecurity career development path, how structured an approach is there to that in today's world?
Well, I don't think it's very structured at all. I think it's pretty informal, and that's why people look among themselves and they don't quite know how to proceed. So right now, we think the best way is to bring in an outside party on a part-time basis that might not even be present. Could a few visits a year, but it's a remote, and it's not, like we said, it's just not that. It's not difficult stuff. It's just a different way of thinking about what it is we're doing.
Correct. Because I imagine the business processes need to be modified so that you're not there on staff or on contract permanently as well.
Right. And the way I look at the change, the reason we call it a cybersecurity hygiene is if you think about before we understood bacteria and the threat that bacteria had on our health, people wouldn't wash their hands. They wouldn't, clean things. They didn't take care of meat. They wouldn't take care of their meats and stuff like that properly. Once we understood that bacteria existed, we started doing things a little bit differently, and we were healthier. It's the same thing. It's a hygiene for installing and maintaining systems. It's not a different act. It's just a hygiene that makes it, more secure.
That's a great anecdote. It makes absolute sense.
Yeah.
Oh, and I think the project phase of it is important too. I think most of the discussion in the industry right now is around operations and what can we do to keep day-to-day operations safe. But you don't see a lot of focus on how to incorporate cybersecurity concerns through the life cycle of a project. We have a lot of end users that are modernizing building automation systems right now. They have these systems in place that are 20, 25, 30 years old, and they're going through a big modernization project. Cybersecurity needs to be a part of the life cycle of that project as well. So it's good that we're providing some guidance through that engineering project phase too.
Oh, absolutely. If it's done the first time, then it's just, you don't have to bring the guys back.
Mm-hmm.
And it just has to be a consideration in the beginning. It's not difficult to figure out. NIST identifies the considerations. So, anyone who's got any technical experience can read those considerations and totally understand it from the beginning. This is not difficult stuff, but it is a cultural transition as much as a technology transition.
Absolutely. Well, this has been a great call, Joel. I want to thank you for joining today. Do we have any final points you want to bring out before we kind of wrap things up here? Or I think it's been a great discussion and a lot of good takeaways here and some, pretty good solid advice. And you don't have to spend a lot of money. You can start simple. There are many things you can do to improve your cyber hygiene right now in building automation, both through the project phase and the operational phase. Do you have any sources for references, resources, and stuff like that, Joel, that you want to point out?
Well, I really like the book The Perfect Weapon by David Langer on the geopolitics of cybersecurity, and it spends a lot of time on probably the most sophisticated cyber attack that's been perpetrated to date, Stuxnet. And it brings up all the issues that we really talked about here. I think that sensors are overlooked in their vulnerability. And I think Joe Weiss should get a lot of credit for pounding that drum.
Yeah, we know Joel, yeah.
Yeah. I mean, and you know what he's going to say. And it's just great because those sensors are totally undefended. And the hackers know it. And that's just what they go for. And that's why those 3 building systems are under constant attack.
And that's particularly true for building systems. I don't think, not a lot of the end users in the process industries like refining and oil and gas have really latched onto this idea yet. But in building systems, it's definitely a big threat. People are coming in through the sensor level. And so many of these sensors, I mean, I have yet to see an inherently secure sensor, right?
Exactly. You're right. They don't have those design elements in them. But the Stuxnet, I don't know how familiar you are with Stuxnet, but it's 100% an industrial SCADA control.
Yeah, very much familiar with it. Yeah.
It's beautifully designed and implemented and deployed. It was just amazing, I think. And it's pretty old now. It's about 6 or 7 years old.
Well, now we have stuff that's built on top of that. So we have like Triton or Trisys, which is going after process safety systems and all this stuff that really is becoming overall more sophisticated and more targeted at this kind of obscure OT level.
Right.
So don't think that these guys aren't going to take the time to reverse engineer an obscure industrial protocol to get access to an obscure older control system. I mean, those things are already happening. It's already a threat. So,
and the point that I always want to make is that they really come through the overlooked, undersecured building IoT.
Right.
Those 3 things: the video surveillance, the voice over IP phone, and office machines.
Yeah.
Who would have thought?
It's the influx of IoT technology. And we do see, built for purpose industrial IoT. We call it the industrial edge stack, for the industrial Internet of Things.
Like that.
And yeah, IoT, like we said in our separate conversation, is such a nebulous term. What if you ask 5 different people, you get 5 different answers. It's really just a term for a collection of technologies that are now being used increasingly at the operational layer, like cloud and AI and edge computing and all these types of things that aren't always built for purpose for these applications. And it's definitely a concern that many of the end users and owner operators are selecting products, and a lot of times in their selection criteria, the topic of cybersecurity just isn't there. So it needs to be. Anyway, thanks for joining us today, Joel. This has been Joel Rakow of Fortium Partners, and that is, I assume, www.fortiumpartners.com.
Yes, sir.
Is that your web address? Okay. And with me here is Jim Frazer, and thanks again for listening to the ARC Smart Cities and Cybersecurity Today podcast.
Thanks, Joel. Thanks, Larry.
Thank you. Enjoyed it.
Thanks.
Broadcasting from Boston, Massachusetts, the Smart Cities podcast is the only podcast dedicated to all things smart cities. The podcast is the creation of ARC Advisory Group's Smart City practice. ARC advises leading companies, municipalities, and governments on technology trends and market dynamics that affect their business and quality of life in their cities. To engage further, please like and share our podcast or reach out directly on Twitter @SmartCityARC. viewpoints, or on our website at www.arcweb.com/industries/smart-cities.